So it's May 30th, 2022. We are on our Uposita Day, new moon Uposita Day. And just recited our precepts, bhikkhus, samaneras, anagarkas, laity. After we've had our visiting Ajahns who've been here, it's been a bit of a quieter time before the arrival of our elder grandfather, as Ajahn Cunda was speaking about Lumpur Sumedho, the first Western monk in the Ajahn Chah Sangha. I think I might not be exactly right, but I believe he's 54 pansa this year, so he's been a monk for about 54 years. Started when he was 34, he's 88. There's been a lot of requests for people to come here and stay in June, and I've been reminding people, though, that there's not, when you're 88, there's not necessarily a lot of guarantees for how you're going to be feeling on a particular day. So we're not sure how much Lumpur will be around. But he said he'll give talks on the Wampras in the afternoon, 3 p.m. I had a visit today with some friends of mine who I hadn't seen for, it seems like it's been a long time, might have almost been a decade. I knew them when I was in Anagarika, and one of them actually who I sat with, and I was sitting retreats, longer retreats, before I became a monk. And I was just reflecting about the nature of time and seeing that we've all gotten older. But I don't usually think of myself that way, as an older person. But a couple of days ago I was working with some younger people, and my back has been hurting lately, so at a certain point I was working in the garden with them, and they were helping dig this enormous hole for a plant. And I just said, my back's hurting, I can't lift anymore. And the younger woman who was here, I think she was about 25 or so, said, that's okay. Us young people can do this for you. You can kind of rest. And that was, I think, the first time in my life someone's actually implied, yeah, you're old. Just take it easy, old man. Rest your weak bones. Let us youngins take care of the problem here. And I was, I'm definitely a lot older now, older than when I arrived, and time passes. But I was speaking with the other monks, some of the other monks about this, and it's a strange perception, this sense of age and time, because I don't feel, I'm 48 now, and I don't feel 48. My back feels 64, but I don't, it doesn't, it's this strange perception. I remember when I was in my later 20s, I was working as a mental health counselor, and working with one of the patients, and I knew he was about my age now, and he kind of just was I don't know, something, I brought some package out for him or something, and he kind of just went right down on his knees and opened the package. And I thought, wow, such vigor for such a older man. And then, just thinking about that, yeah, that's about the same age now. And just that perception of what it is to be older, or what it is to be of a different age. And it just seems so strange because it's hard to kind of really fathom age in a way of feeling like I feel 25 now, or I feel, 38 or almost 50 or something. But our body can usually tell us. So we can receive the information from our body. We don't heal so well. It gets to be usually there's more things going wrong. And also that sense of there is an attitudinal change that can occur. Sometimes what's more important, or we have a sense of some innate sense that, yeah, we're getting closer to a point where we won't be able to age anymore. That there's an end. And it's hard, it's hard to sometimes grasp that. Some of us have more of a connection to that, and others not. And sometimes for others it's just not really existent at all. The sense of death or an end of life doesn't really come into consciousness because it's an unknown. It's something we haven't necessarily, we can't remember experiencing before, at least. But the relation that I think about in terms of this is the relationship of time and how we relate to time passing. And age is one of those markers. But it's just one marker we have. How we think about time, or how we think about our lives and what we do with our time. The Buddha describes the Dhamma as timeless, and there can be a lot of ways that we think about that. And the obvious way is that you can think about that the Dhamma doesn't have a time where it doesn't exist. There isn't a time that there's no Dhamma. It's sort of like ever-present laws of existence. But we can also think of that meaning of timelessness as that there isn't really a sense of time with how we practice. Our understanding of the Dhamma is not bound by particular points of along a linear thread. So the Dhamma always is present. It's always there for us. And how we relate to time is, it's very interesting. It's sort of like, it seems very solid and fixed. And we can, in a very easy sense, get quite addicted to the meaning of time. For example, in the monastery, we have, most of you, I would imagine most of you are waking up with some sort of alarm. So you set your clocks up to some sort of time that you imagine you're going to get up or you're wanting to get up. And then this time is corresponding to everybody else's time. So we all meet on time in a particular place. But again, this is just sort of a concept. If we think about more the word change, then that's really the sense of all time is. It's just change. So we're changing our positions, we're all getting out of bed together. Some of us earlier than others, but that's when we're kind of all coming to meet. So this is like just a change in our community. And we keep changing over and over again, but a lot of times it's more of this sense of when and where in our minds we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to be doing. I have 15 minutes until Ajahn Cunda is done with reciting the precepts, and I need to come in. So there can be this sense of that we have of particularly like when we're doing things and how long it's going to take and when it's going to be finished and when the next activity is going to begin and what I'm going to be doing in that activity, where I'm going to be going, who I'm going to be with, who's not going to be there at this particular time. So one of the helpful things is to relate to this teaching that the Buddha gives around akaliko, this timelessness, in a similar way, how we relate to the Dhamma being timeless. Because there's just this sense of like, also when is it appropriate for us to practice? It's like you go into the kitchen and we have maybe an intention for that to be practiced, but that's not the time to really practice Dhamma. At least that's where our minds sometimes go. It's time to make some food, or time to get tea prepared, breakfast. Then I'll go practice. I'll go spend my time practicing. So we have to be very careful about this. We often will end up dividing our experience throughout the day based on the times that we do things, and we can get very addicted to that. And so we project ourselves into the future or into the past when this happened or when that's going to happen. And we're not really aware of our sense of this timeless quality of practice. Now it serves as a convention. We do need to use time more as a convention, but it's often not too helpful for us to relate to it in our sort of splitting up of everything in our experience. So people often will describe deep contemplative states as if time has sort of melted away. In a sense, it's been deconstructed, it's no longer there. And it's sort of a disorienting and reorienting process we can have. Because we let go of that passage, we let go of that linear path that we project within our own minds. So we often hear of this sense of being here and now. So this is a sense of what the present moment is, people will talk about. And that's when time is really no longer a factor in our experience. We're not relating to what's next, or who I am, or who I'm going to be. And so with a sense of akaliko, we also have a sense of self or anatta that's arising. That the not self, the dissolution of a cohesive way that we think about ourselves also melts away. So we're trying to use the conventions in our lives, but we're just seeing them very clearly as conventions, something as a marking of a passage of change, rather than when I need to do this, or how much time I have left. And sometimes this convention can be very useful for us. So a useful convention is, for example, where the Buddha asks us to reflect on how well we're using time in our experience. It's like a tamutasa me ratindiwa vi tipatanti iti. So that's like the days and nights are relentlessly passing. How well am I spending my time? So there's an acknowledgement that change is continually occurring. There is a passage of experiences that are going over and over again, and we are changing, we are aging. And eventually that change will lead to death. And in that acknowledgement, we are seeing a convention of understanding around that, a projection of the future. And so we're trying to be aware of how we use our lives, how we use our experience to the utmost, because it is limited. There is no one who gets younger. So there is very much a sense of using this convention, but at the same time letting go of it, not being run by our sense of time and minutes and hours. For myself, I often fall into this with just wanting to know what time it is, how much time is left. I have a clock right in front of me. It's okay, how much more time shall I talk for? And then I can see that there's issues of control around this. Like, when is Ajahn Cunda going to ring the bell during the meditation period? I can think, Ajahn rings the bell usually after 45 minutes, but Ajahn Cunda was an hour. And then I relate to that as in a way of through an impatience of, I wish this was different. Wish it could end sooner. Or I could say, I wish it could last longer. So we keep relating to this in a way that it's, you can see it's limiting me, it's limiting my mind. Because in the end when we're meditating, when we're with the present moment, we're with our own experience, time just disappears. And if we're able to follow that well when we're sitting, for example, in meditation, then when the bell rings, It's just another sound, it's just another experience for us. So when you are meditating, that's a very good thing that you can tune into, is like, what is your present state whenever the bell rings at the end of the period? Was there a sort of agony around the continuation of the sitting, or were you wrapped up in some thought world? What is that? What is that for you when that occurs? And it can be a very good learning experience, rather than just seeing like, I can't, this is going to be over, either I can't wait for it, or I wish it would just last longer and longer. These are all our desires for some sort of change to occur. But in the moment when you do just hear that bell and you're not caught up, and you are present with whatever it is you're observing, perhaps it's your breath, some other experience of the body, then you get that sense of timelessness. You get that sense of like, that's right here, right now. And one of the problems that exists after that is then the mind immediately grasps onto a new object. Usually it's our sense of self awakens, and we lose that sense of present. Okay, what's next? What do I do next? Oh, that's right, there's a chant coming, and then we're going to end, and then I'm going to do a chore. What am I going to do? And on it goes. We get back into our projection of time and place, and who and what we are is created again. So one way to actually deal with this is sort of like it's sort of like how people are use their phones. They're just these ubiquitous devices. You just whip out, you check, and so you try to stop doing that. Try to stop doing that with a watch or with clocks or what have you. And you still have to attune to, of course, certain things you're going to do during the day. That's where the convention is useful. But the sense of like how much time is left, how much more do I have to do this, or what's next, that's something that would be very useful for us to let go of. I remember carrying concrete bags when I was a younger man, and was doing that. We were bringing them down to the 2 tanks right here, and Ajahn was helping, and he heard me muttering 7, and then a minute later 6, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh well, I'm just counting the bags I have left." And he advised me. He said, "Don't do that. Don't do that with your experience. It's not going to help you." Just figuring out when something is going to be over, when the dukkha is going to end. And we think about that, we can, like if you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, like, oh man, can't wait till this is over. Or even if you see someone, you're like, oh, geez, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay in the monastery with this particular person here or whatever. We project our own futures upon ourselves, and then that we're creating this sense of me, and it's quite a limited sense. But that's what we love to do, whether it's negative or positive. One of the things that is often heard in our tradition about the practice of what the monks are learning, especially sometimes you hear this around practices in Thailand, like what it was that some monks will talk about when they've been practicing for a while. So what have you learned? Well, I learned how to wait. A lot of the practice is sort of sitting around and just waiting and not having the next thing to do. And we can hear about this often in the stories around Ajahn Chah and how he would train the monks, and they'd be experiencing experiences that would be sometimes described as excruciating. It's like monks, Ajahn Chah could be up just talking for like 2 or 3 hours straight. Doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And just that sense of waiting. But we're not waiting for something to end. It's just that sense of being patient with the experience. It's the sense of waiting here and now, not waiting for something to be over. So it's more like just patiently abiding, and of course being aware of our habits that are telling us something has to happen. Often with the late night sitting that we have on these Wampras, there's a sense of dread before the night begins, or sometimes in sitting meditation, the nodding can be occurring. It's, oh, when is this going to end? I can't wait till it's over. And right there is an excellent point of sort of acknowledgement in our experience. Oh, there it is again. Me somewhere else happy, me somewhere else doing something that's not so unpleasant. And so we can also be aware of our views around that. Think this isn't the time for something, or this is the right time. There's often a lot, it's fairly frequent in my own experience that after speaking with somebody, I often think, oh, that was the wrong timing. That wasn't the right time to say that, or I should have been more aware. And that can be a useful way of thinking about it. Like, oh, there's appropriate points that we can speak to others, and other times, if you will, that it's not the right point to be addressing someone. So again, this can always be a useful convention, but we have to be aware of when it's useful and when it's not. So I think it's quite helpful to be questioning this sense of timelessness in our own practice, this sense of what the Buddha is teaching around Dhamma and timelessness. Because just if you're in it might sound like if you're in the present moment, you're just attuned to here and now, then you can't possibly relate to another person. But I think that's actually the opposite. It's sort of like that's when true relating can actually occur. So when we're, for example, present with somebody, then there's not looking towards anything else to happen in that moment. There's just a receiving quality. So we receive that experience, that person, without having to do anything. If you sometimes hear somebody described as, oh, that person, he's so present when I talk to him, he's very much there. Because there's that sense that, oh, they're not anywhere else, they're not trying to go to get somewhere, to do something, to get away. And so we can apply that to a very receptive quality of listening. And we can keep attuning to that sense of like what the Buddha means around the Dhamma being timeless. It can always be present for us. And you can ask yourself right now, do you have a perception of time in your experience? It could be something like, what's the point of this Dhamma talk? Or I think you've made your point. Or when's it going to be over? Or what comes after this? I'm not really sure, I don't know the schedule here. and what comes next. So as a training device, and how we think about khanti or patience, just try to keep bringing that sense of timelessness up, that sense of, can I be present with this moment? Can I enter into the sort of domain of nothing to be done or nothing to do? Letting go of my need to be practicing, to doing something. I have to watch the breath. I have to be present. Now's the time for meditation. So we even have the potential of letting go of that. So there's just the observed. There's no more observer. And time becomes unbound. So these are just some reflections tonight. And encourage you to use them if they're helpful. And anything that hasn't been useful, then feel free to leave it behind. You will.